Hello, welcome to This Is It Journal. Today, for the first time I'm talking like we've recorded 18 episodes, but uh, we finally have our first guest. I do a little introduction here. We have our guest, Vibhore Sharma. Vibhore has spent more than 7 years in investing in science-led early deep tech startups through Capital 2B and Red Start across robotics, aerospace, semiconductors, and climate technology and health tech. And he also happens to be one of the early members of Naukri.com, became the CTO of InfoEdge, and now is an honorable dear friend of ours. So we're happy to have you, Vibhor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here. It's
Yeah.
a privilege to be the first guest.
So I know.
Yeah, very excited to have you. We've been having a lot of conversation from the design perspective about deep tech and what we can do for them.
Yeah.
And because we have been working also with Capital 2B and the portfolio companies of Capital 2B, we've had the opportunity to talk together outside camera. So we thought that having a different point of views and just us as design partners would be nice.
No,
This
absolutely.
podcast.
Absolutely.
Is this natural setting for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
This is how you are in a living room, right? How are you finding the Ahmedabad heat?
it is comparable to Delhi, but what I realized the UV index was higher than Delhi.
I know. As we learned through our technological advancements of a phone app. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, really lovely to have you. We have prepped a certain set of questions that we're going to follow, but feel free to interrupt, stop.
I will.
Yes, you will. Yeah, it's also really nice to have you around because usually when we talk of design, we talk of it from the perspective of we are designers. We've been serving deep tech companies, hardware companies, consumer hardware companies, and when we look at design, we look at it from the perspective of business. Yes, we look at it from the perspective of narrative, storytelling, clarity. But from your lens, we'd love to hear a little more of like why do you think a conversation about design and deep tech matters now? What do you think?
No, it definitely matters a lot now. Um, and I've been seeing this space for a wee bit, and I realized what is happening now, and I largely look at early stage companies, is that a lot of these deep tech ideas now are coming out of the lab. They're getting into factories, they're getting into healthcare institutions, they're getting into defense systems, or at least aspiring to. They're aiming to get into manufacturing and so on. Um, so it's a very, very different ballgame altogether, in my view. Because when you're in a lab, you just need the science to be correct.
Yeah, very true.
But when you're outside, leaving the lab, entering the world, you need the science to be understood. You need
Yeah.
the tech to be understood.
Yeah.
For you to be able to convince the government to give you a grant, for you to be able to convince a seed, pre-seed investor to write the first check, for you to convince the first willing or grudgingly willing user to give you a pilot and to translate that pilot post feedback and iteration into a product that's worth selling, scaling, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And that involves a lot of explaining, you know, um, because the user is not looking at science. The user is looking at what can I use? Is it worth paying the money? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
The investor is looking whether, hey, this is going to be a company or not, and things like that. So you have to do that translation of what you build and what the users understand you build.
Yeah. I think we've had this. So this is obviously when you're looking to invest on stuff like when you're looking for investment series A, series B from our lens, that's an obvious one for sure for the founders that we work with because I need to raise, I need to make a deck, I need to make those. However, on the other front, we have also recently experienced a lot more of like founders coming after they've raised and now they need to get their first buyers, their first JVs, their first partnerships, and it's become more and more prevalent of like it needs to be legible for not just investors to see the potential in your technology but to for early pilots, buyers to actually see the relevance of it in execution at scale. um since since you have been a part of the Indian deep tech ecosystem for the longest time now, do you believe or feel that Indian deep tech companies are under designed?
Most many, if not all.
Yeah.
But that's not because they lack intelligence or taste. I think design is an afterthought.
Yeah.
What happens is that founders are largely coming from a technology or a science background. A lot of them have been deep into research or looking at research that's applicable. And they say, hey, listen, let's make a company out of this.
Yeah.
Right. And the science works and they take it out and they start going to people and saying, you know what, we built this and we want you to invest. They go out and meet potential users and say, you know, can we do a pilot and so on and so forth. But that takes a lot of time, you know, there's a lot of failures there. And a lot of people are not able to understand what has been built, what is usable, where are the risks, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then they come back and say, you know what, we need to figure out how to sell this,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And let's design a PPT, let's design the website better, and so on and so forth. So to me, a lot of them look at design as a fix.
Yes.
But I disagree because I believe design is not a fix. Design is the way to determine what the product of the company is going to be.
Yeah.
You know, what are you building? Why are you building? Who's your first buyer? You know, all of that, you know, is part of the design language in my view.
Yeah.
And that's where the gap is.
Yeah. Yeah, recently in our work, we have been in the situation where many companies have come to us and we have seen their technology that really breaks through. But their competitor and sometimes foreign competitors are actually like looking better and like selling better, not because the tech is better, but simply because they communicate it in like a much more like thoughtful way. And that's like some people have been trying to help them that if you come even like 3-4 months earlier than what you've come to us now, there's so much more work we can do together. And it's not about fixing and like potholes in a way. It's literally make the road for them to be kept like leaders in the industry.
Yeah.
That's what we've also sought the most value in our partnerships with early stage and eventually a certain level of companies, where the longer the partnership is, the more results we reap together. We've experienced that from our experience firsthand, which is why I wonder, like, what's your take on, because every startup has a different stage, right? So because we've seen under design startups of all stages, like in the early stage of you don't need as much narrative as you need strategy and clarity and understanding of what the technology is, and eventually you need scale, you need narrative, you need the go to market, you need the story behind it, right? Way more legibly. So I wonder, like, what in your opinion, what does it cost to be under design as a startup at each stage? Like, what are the stage, like, because I think design is always looked at as an artistic lens almost, because I think certain design institutes also make it that way for us as education, but it's a business. It's logical. Design is, and it's not computational, but it's
It has a purpose.
it has a purpose, right? It's a problem solving thing. So yeah, what's your take on that? What do those stages look like?
Well, you're right. And I'm not a designer by training, by far from it. But
From your heart, then.
well, I've always been fascinated by Scandinavian, Japanese design, German engineering, which in its own way looks at functionality as design.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the way they build it. And of course, I've been in the tech industry outside of deep tech. I've been doing this for almost 2.5 decades now. So I've seen that the deficit of design is a big problem, not just in deep tech, but in any product per se. But the way a product is designed makes it, run ahead, leaps and bounds. And that's what it is. But I think, what it costs, a company to be under-designed. Fundamentally, I think the biggest thing is time. You lose a lot of time,
Yeah.
right? Because when you start off, you have to spend a lot of energy and time to convince investors. You have to spend a lot of time to convince customers who can give you a POC or a pilot project. You have to convince a lot of people at the late stages also.
Yeah.
So with investors, and people will come at my throat for this, but I think, most pitch conversations look like technical lectures.
Yes,
or tutorials, if you will.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
With the customers, it's a long drawn conversation, which gets flagged or masked as long sales cycles. My view is if a product is understood, solves a problem, the customer will not take tremendous amount of time.
Yeah.
They will jump at it.
Very true.
Um, and also for technical scientific talent to be hired, that's a problem because they don't understand the mission.
Yeah.
They don't know what the company is building, where it's headed. Should I tag along with them? Should I jump in and contribute? So hiring cuts both ways also, right? So one is time, and second is of course the amount of funds that you can raise. You're not able to convince a lot of people, so you go with the partners who can fund you, what they can fund you. You raise little, you lose a lot of equity, or you raise late, and then most often than not, the people who are coming in are not able to write follow-on checks, and then you're struggling for more funds down the line.
Yeah.
That's there. And the third thing is that a lot of people are unclear about how the pilot will work. At early stages, so you don't know what to expect from the pilot.
Yeah.
What defines success. What is failure. How do you price it? What changes if this product comes in? All of that is
Yeah.
unclear, at least in some of the companies that I've seen closely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that we've experienced ourselves is that, um, I mean, one of the approaches that we follow on very, very keenly when we're talking to companies, especially in the deep tech space, right? We actually ask them politely, so without invading the privacy of the company, the transcripts of their sales calls, the lagged sales calls. What were the questions asked? Like, what kind of questions are your investors asking? What kind of questions are your partners asking? Because that's what we need to solve for. That's priority one. If you're not able to communicate that from partly website, deck, whatever the collateral looks and feels like, it's time. It's an exercise and it's money wasted then, because design is supposed to solve for that. It's supposed to reduce the amount of questions you get in your sales cycle, and that's where you save a lot of time. Because we've actually experienced. I like, what do your robot, like for example, we did a project for a robotic simulation company. It's like, what does your like sort of indie developers ask for? They ask for this. They ask to copy. They ask if it integrates with their current ecosystem. So we need to answer those questions, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So I agree on the time saved piece.
Also, I think like there is because design has been understood so far with like this wrapping layer, there is a misunderstanding in terms of time. Companies are ready to spend a lot of time on their technology because everybody knows this is what it requires. But when it comes to design, it's almost something that needs to have repercussion directly. And what we have observed is like the longer you work on your design asset, the better the outcomes actually becomes. It's not just, oh, I will just fix my website and that's it. I will have directly all the partnership coming to me. This is not how it works. It's a multiplication of different assets for different stakeholders also.
It's also the ecosystem piece, because the moment you mentioned the hiring talent, scientific talent piece, something we've experienced firsthand. Because a lot of companies, especially with longer R&D cycles, there are certain obviously results that are proprietary and confidential and you can't share them, but there are some that are publicly disclosed, and you take them to scientific conferences and events, and events made to just share that within the community of scientists and technical folks. And we've seen those require communication as well. And then probably some of those assets, if uploaded in the right manner as white papers, research paper on the website, gives you access to that community finding you in that manner. We've seen that firsthand.
No, absolutely. Presenting a research paper is different from inviting PhDs to work with you to build a product based on that research paper.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
take it forward.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point, I think that is the problem. Design is not cosmetics.
No.
The design, if you look at the software paradigm, design thinking has become first principles now in software development, right? Everybody works like that. Labs like IDEO and all started that.
Yeah.
But the point is, it has become integral part of the software paradigm several decades after, when people have realized that software becomes the product.
Yes.
And devoid of design, it's software, not a product.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, absolutely.
I have a bit of a vanity-led question for you. and this could be controversial in a way, but do you think if we draw like a parallel line between two lines, one with a weaker technology, one for companies, one with a weaker technology sort of perspective, one with a stronger, but the one with the weaker is able to communicate their product, make it more understandable, legible, adaptable, all of those things. Do you reckon it has more chances of succeeding as a company despite having a weaker tech stack?
Potentially. Potentially,
crazy.
yes. Because you see, the fundamental thing is the market. And the market, I'm using it loosely, but that means, users, buyers, investors, regulators, whoever you have me. They don't compare products like engineers or scientists.
Yeah.
They don't compare science. They don't compare tech. They're looking at, hey, listen, for example, an investor is looking at it and saying, is this a science project? Is this an invention? Is this a company?
Yeah.
Is this a product, platform, tool? What is? Same with everybody else.
Yeah.
But if you have a great narrative, which tells everybody, look, this is how it works. This is the value it creates. This is the impact that's possible. And it's worth it.
Yeah.
Right. So the market looks at risk.
Mhm.
Market looks at friction points.
Yeah.
Right. If your narrative itself is not able to sort of unpack those,
Yeah.
and it's only talking about complex bits of technology, it's a hard sell.
Yeah.
So if a product goes out with a story that, it's an easy to use product, it's got some unfair advantage of technology, it'll integrate well,
Yeah.
It'll not disrupt a lot of things, it'll create impact, and so on and so forth. The odds are, adoption will be easier and then faster.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting conversation. I just wanted to ask you because we invited you to talk about design and deep tech from the lens of from an investor or someone on the other side of the table, seen that is what led you to the conclusion that all those like sort of, how do you say, miscommunications or technology not being legible or adaptable is a um, function of communication design? How did that come to your head?
Well, not in as many words,
Yeah.
but I firstly, like I said, I believe in design, first, and not as an afterthought. And second, I was seeing with a lot of the companies out there that um, not having a coherent story was becoming an impediment in explaining to investors, like I said, to potential customers, to regulators, and then you always looking at the West, what's happening in the West, how can we replicate that? How can we sort of have a story like that? It just doesn't add up. So to me, it was more like, hey, listen, and here's the thing. I think for a lot of the science and tech companies, and like I said, I've lived this as someone who's been in tech for a long while. A lot of the truth is internal. What I mean by that is whether the idea works or not, the science works or not, tech works or not, it's all internal amongst the team. The people are doing that, huddling in the trenches, in the lab.
Yeah.
Hey, it works. Hey, it doesn't. This model is giving errors, this, that, and the other, right? When you take it out to the market, to the users, right? Like as a techie, my biggest problem was internally within the company also to build a narrative about what I've done and built. It just felt like over exaggeration,
Yeah.
amplifying something which was, well, all right. What's the big deal about it? Um, and therefore it is what is called a storytelling. I think, and there are examples of say companies like Amazon which did that, right? The Amazon, I read about it that when they have to build a product or feature, they start with a press release, right? That if you were to launch this product slash feature, what will be the press release for this? Now, for the engineer building that, it gives you a different lens to look at the tech,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Yeah, it's not in isolation anymore.
Yeah. You look at the usability and the user
Yeah.
before you even think about building the product
Yeah.
or the tech, right? And that's where it all stems from. And then design thinking has been part of the software paradigm already.
Yeah.
So I believe that is where the biggest gap is, because when we talk about companies raising the next round, it's very difficult for them to be coherent about a story that is understood by the investors. So what investors say is, hey, listen, show us the validation and we'll jump in.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So when now you've already mentioned that, when companies are raising the second round and whatnot, what do you expect from companies at a bare minimum on the second round that you might not expect in the first round? It's fine. It's an early stage. He's
Well, first round is largely, is the tech going to work or not? What are the risks and so on and so forth. At the later stages, it's more about you doing pilots, you're doing POCs. What have you learned? What assumptions have failed?
Yeah.
You know, uh, what paths that you took to productize and commercialize worked and what did not. So I think a lot of those learnings should get embedded in the thinking, in the product, in the strategy of the company, which leads to a pathway, a clear pathway of, deterministic milestones, which may or may not be achieved. That's a different story altogether because that's the risk. And the risk, of course, right? As an investor, I don't want a company to say we don't have any risk. I don't want this risk to disappear. It's impossible, right? It's like in software, they said, hey, listen, there are no bugs. They have just not been discovered yet.
Yeah.
So the risk should not be disappearing or not be invisible, but it should be called out.
Yeah.
So otherwise, what happens is, as an investor, I say, look, either these folks don't know, or they're underplaying it, or there's something amiss. The story doesn't add up. So call out the risk.
Yeah.
And call out the ways you will address it.
Yeah.
Largely.
Yeah.
Some lack of transparency then also a little bit.
Well, it's not because of lack of transparency, but I think, sometimes as a tech founder, somebody might believe, like,
Yeah.
I'll sort this out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. I got this covered.
Yeah.
Right. The assumption there is that it's all right not to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And this issue in storytelling and communicating and everything like this, because you have been working now with many deep tech companies and over many years, has it evolved, this problem, or is it constantly the same? Have you seen a difference over the years or no?
It is evolving, but very, very slowly. Very, very slowly. Yeah.
In a better direction.
In a better direction, also because there are some tailwinds, as they're called, in some sectors.
Okay.
So it's easier and better in those sectors because the media, the conversations around it, the policies, those are also doing the talking.
Yeah.
Not just the investor, the founders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the more different people are talking about it, the better it will become for you.
Yeah.
As somebody who's also been on the other side of that tech playing field, right? In the early stages of Naukri.com, whatnot, from your experience. When you've sat on then the other side of the table where you're making investments, stuff like that, has there been moments where you've had to look past the weak positioning, structuring, narrative, story, legibility? Have you been able to look past it? And then what is that your experience leading you to look past it? Or was there something specific that has that ever happened that you actually physically realized for yourself that you need to look past whatever they're saying and actually see the technology in its rawest format, see the potential in it?
Yeah. No, luckily for me, I love reading science and tech journals. So I read a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm able to sort of go deeper into technological and science conversations with the founders. And therefore, for me, the biggest thing is to seek evidence of unusual depth in the company, of the paradigm that they're working in, of the problem solution, paradigm that is, and that, to my mind, lends a definite unfair advantage to the company as opposed to the others. So therefore, I'm able to sort of understand that, and narrative and all, like I said, and we go very early, so it's
very
addressable at that point in time, right? Because it's very raw, it's very crude, it's just moving out of concept, right? So So one is that, and second thing, it has to stem from an insight, because ultimately the idea comes from not just science, but what is the insight? Because you're saying, hey, listen, all existing science and tech is not working, but this one will,
Yeah.
or this is better. So the insight has to be absolutely rare, and therefore the depth and the insight,
Yeah.
lead to each other, and so on and so forth. And then the understanding that founder can evolve,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's very important. Because if you're rigid, then it's very hard to sort of change and mutate and react, to do things in a certain way for people to understand the science and tech,
Yeah.
take it to market, to take customers into confidence, to sort of give you pilots and convert them into revenue and so on.
Yeah.
So those are things I sort of try and look at beyond the narrative, because it's the benefit of doubt that I must give, because we're looking at people who are just thinking about an idea to move to a product and company, very early stages.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting because from our lens, I think like we've been having more and more conversations around credibility and what it takes to be credible as a deep tech company, especially because um like you said, it's internal, right? When founders and early stage teams, very early teams are building something, especially in deep tech, which involves very long R&D cycles and testing and validation, all those kind of things. It's an internal battle. Therefore, credibility is not something they seek out for. They seek out for excellence with technology, which is fair, of course, but
Matters, yeah.
I think it's like it feels very disheartening for teams and founders to face that roadblock that, hey, we spent years in building this and now we're coming to these partners that will be potential JVs. They know it. They know the potential. They have projected numbers. They have all these graphs. However, that credibility piece, however vain that word has vain connotations attached to it, they're not credible enough. I'm not gonna go to this specific shop because it's not credible enough, right? But um, what do you think makes a deep tech company feel credible? Because we've seen some really like startups that have raised a lot of money, a lot of funds, have incredible investors behind them. Look and feel, not just look and feel, but look immature, less credible. And I've seen them stall at a certain stage where they're looking for a fix. We've been in positions where we've been asked for a fix. So what do you think?
Yeah.
It's just
right.
so. What do you think makes for that credibility, for the lack of a better word?
Yeah.
Clarity.
I mean, I'm going to try and take a stab at the English language, right? Credibility essentially is um, the minimal distance between what a product or a company claims it does and the end user or buyer believing and trusting that they will deliver on that claim,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and it's an after effect of a conversation, of looking at the product, an experience with the product, whatever you have, or somebody else telling you about it. It's hard to put a finger on, but I guess, what happens is that some of the founders and companies are just institutional grade, from the word go get, in their thinking, in their mindset, in the way they build the product and technology, in their vision, everything, right? I mean, unlike the other counterparts, they're not looking at just fundraise, they're not looking at just valuation, they're just not looking at
Hmm.
um, disruption, or calling yourself a platform and whatnot. But it's more about, hey, listen, who's my first buyer?
Yeah.
What do I get out of a first and the second and the third POC? And how do I iterate fast despite being deep tech?
Yeah.
How do I change? How do I fix things? What are my key milestones?
Yeah.
Where's my supply chain? How do I get a hold of that?
Yeah.
What are the risks? How do I manage those risks?
Yeah.
Things like those.
Yeah.
Is there a manufacturing sort of capability I need to build? And do I do it in-house? Do it with somebody else? How do I get a handle of that?
Yeah.
And how do I get customers and investors and regulators to trust me?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their lens is very different.
Yeah.
I think so. They're not thinking about everything like this as an afterthought,
No.
but
It is
they're
true. Yeah.
thinking it ahead in time, because that's how they want to be perceived. That's how they want to land. That's how they want to be known. Things like those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had I think recently we've had one of those experiences where we were speaking to a very technical sort of company that builds certain equipment for certain laboratory tests and dry rooms and all those kind of things. And it's the same conversation, right? There's so many regulations around what that equipment will be made of, how sterile, how not sterile, what kind of environments does it need. So there's only so much room for differentiation when it comes to the offering itself, because it's a very technically regulated, graded sort of product. There's more conversation about what then credibility plays a role of in situations like this.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, and I think credibility doesn't fall only on the technology side. And I think this is, don't want to call it a mistake, but it's like a common understanding from deep tech companies we have worked with, that to feel credible, they start by just throwing the most technical information at anyone, that it's like an investor, a designer, partnership or anything, thinking that this is what will give them credibility. And I think this is most of the time very sad, because the technology is really incredible, but just misunderstood because of that.
yeah,
No, you're right. And actually, the problem is that, right? Because in deep tech, everybody's going to build an IP.
exactly.
Everybody's going to build science and tech capabilities which are unprecedented, first of a kind,
Yeah.
hard to replicate, so on and so forth, right? So that's a given. The question is, when you lay it down to the person in front of you, do you expect the person to be a technical co-founder of yours to understand that, or do you make it easier,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
right? And also, all of that comes later. First is, why should anyone in the world care about this new tech? Why should anyone pay for it? Why should anyone use it? What is the problem with what exists? Or why does anything not exist if it doesn't? So on and so forth. And those are worthy questions that people will like the answers to first up,
Yeah.
and then be intrigued and saying, okay, how are you doing it differently then?
Yeah.
Let's jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those approaches that we had with Vibhore. So the initial sort of thought when it comes to especially a hardware company or a product company, which is very evident. This is what our offering is, this is what it does. It's very easy to kind of start making a laundry list of specs, technical specs. It's like, okay, this much coverage area, this much filtration, this is what it's going to do, blah, 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 blah. And then the question comes down to why do I care? And then when we kind of looked at it from the lens of the narrative of you breathe 15,000 liters of air every single day.
And it's not like
And
you
then
stop breathing neither.
as fundamental human beings, it's not about where you live, how clean the air is or not. It's just a fundamental truth, and you do it 90% inside, indoors. And then but then people have these questions like, oh, indoors, I'm not indoors, I'm a really outdoorsy person, I go for a run. Well, yeah, in the car you go in, the gym you go to, the house you stay inside,
Cafe.
you go. And so these are very small, this very small, like sort of fundamental example, but it's how you sort of like make people care, rely.
Yeah, I think that's always what I found the funniest, working with those incredible people in deep tech. It's so easy for them to explain in details their tech and how it works, and they're very excited about it. But simply saying in one sentence what they do and why it matters, it's like we spend weeks actually figuring that out. And talking to the founder or the person in the lab or someone else in marketing, the three of them will have a different answer. Because they work from a different lens. And that's what like communication design, it's not just outside for like external people, but it's also inside the company and inside the people that it really matters.
No, absolutely. And you're right, just because you mentioned that there are different perspectives and so on and so forth. There's this video of one of the physicists, I don't remember, his Brian Greene or whatever, I forget the name now, but he explains the concept of time to people of different ages, right? Starts from a young child of, I don't know, 6, 7, then a teenager, then a little older and middle aged, and so on and so forth. And he's explaining the same concept of time with the nuance that can be understood, or leaving away the nuance that will not be understood by who's listening.
Yeah.
And therefore, what you and how you communicate to an investor, to a customer, to a regulator.
It's different. It has to be. It has to be more than anything else. They don't care about the same thing. even though the company is the same, the technology is the same, it's just you have to understand what the person in front of you needs to know.
Even within the investment space, I've seen from the little I know about it. You obviously know more. But like you mentioned, right? You're and we know we're good friends, so I know that you read research papers before your, I guess, bedtime. Um, but not everybody does that. Not in or not all investments funds are capable of dissecting the nitty gritties of what a science backed like science led startup should talk of. So when it comes to capital, at least I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. The investment space is getting more and more, if not for the lack of a better word, sector agnostics. But there's opportunities in many different sectors, and deep tech happens to be one of them. And let's say in a space where capital, okay, as a founder, as a team in this space, I've managed to secure capital, right? What do I need beside capital? Because I also will go through very long R&D cycles, right? More sector agnostic, more opportunities for investment. I have investment now. What does a startup need beside capital when it comes to?
No, absolutely, and deep tech companies need a lot more,
Yes,
right? And if you, and I'm sure you're aware about it. I mean, this whole RDI and ANRF announcements, the government has announced
Yes.
a lot of funds.
Yes.
That'll change the game completely, and we'll talk about it a bit later. But I mean, capital is going to be abundant. What these companies need is laboratories, testing, fields and sandbags and sandboxes and so on, if you will. Human trials for biopharma companies and so on. They need patient capital, not just capital.
Yes.
Right? They need patient customers, because this is hard tech, so it'll be harder to do it in the first time round, right? So a POC does not mean, because look, a prototype is not a product. A prototype is a demonstration of the concept that it works. A product is trustable. A product is something that is usable by multiple people, multiple number of times, repeatedly. And a product is something that people can pay for and will pay for because it demonstrates that value, not a prototype. So the customers need to be patient about that, so you need a bunch of anchor customers who work with such companies. So a lot of the industry has to come together with startups, right? A lot of the industry has to also come together with academia to bring forth
I agree.
actual real problems that they're facing, for researchers or research-led innovation to think about as problems worth solving for.
Yeah.
Because there's pure sciences research, and there is applied sciences, and then there is product development.
Yeah.
They're very different sort of lenses altogether. So
I know you're like talking from
Hmm.
the lens of being on the other side of the table, but like for me, it's like I have a hard time decompartmentalizing from my lens of viewing things from that sort of design led thinking and design led pieces. But you've been in a place where you've been a technical team member. You've been on the tech, like you think tech first, right? Let's say, why do you think technical founders sort of treat design as an accessory or a late moment fix, like let's bring it in? Because that's, at least from what we've experienced, like 70% of the time that happens. Very, very, very few founders that we work with that fundamentally want design to be a part of their tech product, but it doesn't happen 70% of the time. From what
I think they're just wired like that.
that's what
It's
because
just wiring. Because I told you from my experience, internally communicating something that we built, which was pathbreaking, we would just suddenly launch it and underplay it because we put in a lot of effort, but we're just excited about it working. And like I said, it just feels awful to sort of tom about it. It's not tom-tomming, but that's how it feels to an engineer. Right? Look, can I just state the obvious and move on, please? Can you not understand this? Like, it's like, I'm telling you, this is how it works. Here are research papers, have a look at them and go ahead and have a look. It's just their wiring, is their DNA, I guess. I mean, that's how they think, right? But what they need to understand is that communication is or narrative building is not decorating the truth.
No.
It's how the truth travels.
Yeah. I think also it's to open like a very small bracket. We won't go deep diving into it today, but I don't think it comes only from like the tech perspective about what they know. I have a feeling also it comes from the design perspective side. I feel like over the years, slowly and slowly, design has come a bit closer to art than actually problem solving, because this is the core of what it is. Design on one sentence is like problem solving. It needs to have a real problem and it needs to have a real applicable solution. And I think slowly people have like not understood what it is, and it's also our job. That's why this podcast also exists, about what can we actually do for those companies, because once we explain exactly what we can do for different like deep tech company in different industries, they rarely say no to it now, because they understand they need that, but it needs to be a bit louder. It needs to be more designers also. So
Yeah, from like even as when I joined the biotech startup when I was I was just starting off my career, right? The way design education is structured for us, it's logical, yes, it's problem solving, yes, but it's extremely hypothetical, which makes it very hard to test it outside, because there's no real case studies. Rarely there are case studies. And even if it's very because it's a university, so it's practical knowledge. Things we learn is what we practice now, right? But you never really work on real commercial case studies, even in the slightest. I talk about this experience a lot. I find it really funny because I joined the biotech startup. They had opened a new arm of bio-based simulants for the soil and stuff like that. And I had to design the packaging, even though I had no formal training in actually designing the packaging. I was like, okay, I was the brands and comms lead. I designed the packaging. And of course, as a designer, I'm always like, it should look premium, it should, have all those things. And initially the all the sort of Western inspirations is like, let's clean it up. As a designer, I think one of our biggest pet peeves is like sort of like cluttered designs.
Yeah.
Let's make it super minimal. We made it white. And then I remember the main chief of operations was like, there is literally no way this will reach any village white. This is not gonna happen. So all right, so we changed the color, made it whatever. The price point was the same as the ones in the market, took it to market. And not a single person bought it off the shelf. It was a test batch. And we were wondering why, because it was costed the same. So one of their team sent like a research team on the field trying to figure out why is this not getting bought at all. And figured that it looked more expensive. So nobody was ready to pick it off of.
Yeah.
And this is, we're talking consumer D2C, right? So it's the harshest. I feel like you face really harsh criticism from on field, and then you realize, hey, it's not how pretty I make it.
No.
It's if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, entire
Functional.
design. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
No, you're right.
So-
Absolutely. And that's why you have to keep the end user and buyer
Always.
regulator in mind always.
And it's the same for deep tech companies, but it's not D2C, it's B2B.
It's less visible, actually.
It's less visible, but it's slightly harsher, I would say. Because the result of it is not like, I'm not gonna buy it. The result of it is like, I think your technology is probably not gonna good enough. I don't think it's gonna solve.
Also, I think what happens is a lot of us misinterpret design to be purely aesthetics only.
Yeah.
But it isn't.
Yeah.
Aesthetics is the outcome of everything put together, the way design looks at things, or the design should look at things, right? Design is aspirational of what the product is and what it wants to be, and how it will get used.
And each, I feel like as a design sort of solution, each solution is very different as well. So when there's like rules of UX principles stuff, okay, there's a main call to action which you want your user to do. And usually for most companies these days, like get started. I don't know what, get started. So we were working with this robotic simulation, get started. I'm like, is that your primary CTA? Because I don't think so. I think the curl command, the copy paste of the curl command is how your users are actually using. They're like, yeah, but people usually write get started. I'm like, but you don't have to. That's not your primary CTA. And yeah, I think
it went deep down also, like with this misunderstanding even around the assets around communication design. It's like not anymore, but at the beginning when we started the studio, people used to come being like, I need a website. That's it. I need a website. And now they come to us being like, I'm not sure exactly what's going on. This is the situation. We're not getting the sales we need. So what do we need exactly? And sometimes they don't need a website at all. Sometimes they just need a well-crafted document that explain in like simple page what they do to send to their partnership. And I think just this understanding that actually as designer, this is what we assess for them is missing right now, and
Yeah.
will get better.
Yeah, no, we have enough examples, right, out there. I mean, there are mobile phones that are, they have created an industry by virtue of their design.
Yeah.
There are electric vehicles which have done the same,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. I think that is the problem. That it should not be an afterthought. It is. It determines how the product will be. Yeah.
I think there's also some sort of like ripple sheep mentality situation, being like somebody like I think I should get started. So get started. I get a lot of we get a lot of these questions because we started This Is It in Denmark through our formal training in design and sustainability. Julia's French, I'm Indian, we're based out of India, Ahmedabad at the moment. A lot of times people ask us, why are you in India? You started This Is It in Denmark, you have started it in Europe, whatnot. How do you think, and we know why, because there's the deep tech ecosystem in India, generally speaking, but also the kind of access we've had to founders and teams across the globe. How do you think the deep tech ecosystem in India compares to the rest of the world from your lens or your?
Well, it is evolving, and India has some real strengths. I mean, we've got great talent. We now have a lot of ambition to build things in the deep tech space. We have the government backing ideas, with the large corpus of funds announced. And what I've seen and observed, and I've lived through it because, in InfoEdge we did that also, is that Indian founders, a lot of them, at least in the deep tech paradigm, have a lot of cost discipline.
Yeah, I agree.
And which is why a lot of this deep tech sort of, endeavors are far more economical than Western counterparts. So, and until now, what had happened was that our institutes and academia were lopsidedly, training, guiding, and moving students for the software world, right? Speed, fast turnaround, learn new languages fast, and so on and so forth. I mean, that was the cookie cutter boilerplate approach, right? And that's how you see a lot of software as a service companies come out, a lot of D2C companies come out where software was the mainstay. But I think that shift is happening now.
Yeah.
Disciplines of engineering which were not looked at as glamorous, where people did a certain discipline but still moved to computer science, whilst being an engineer in a certain discipline. I hope and I look forward to that changing. Right.
Yeah.
And so therefore, all of that will evolve. It'll take that, a bunch of time that software took, for people to become really good at what they're doing. Right.
Yeah.
And that shift is going to happen. And of course, academia alone will not help. Like I said, industry has to come together. Private capital has to come into early stages to be able to sort of, help companies being founded and support them and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So all of that has to come together. But I think India is in a good position now to do this.
Yeah, I think we've been whenever we sort of talk about the kind of work we want to do at This Is It specifically, we've been partnering a lot more with Indian deep tech startups and the ecosystem generally speaking. It's been very receptive of good narrative, good design. It's been gradual, even for us for the last, I would say, 1.5 years. We've observed a very gradual upward direction. It's very positive signs, very receptive, agreeable, mentioning some of those pointers. Yet sometimes still we have this like where let's say we put out a design out there and there's a certain connotation being like, oh, that looks like it's designed in the valley. And we're supposed to treat it as a compliment, which I know it's meant with those intentions, but there's still a sort of like, it reveals a certain aspect, like, because we've always been very clear with, we're going to create a global, we are working towards creating a global benchmark for design, but we are based out of India. And that's not something that's a connotation that's associated with India specifically. What do you think it reveals about that mindset, and what do you think in a way the Indian ecosystem needs to respond to? What should what should the ambition be here?
And not just that, but also from like the Indian deep tech investments also. I think like there is a lot of conversation in between how the Indian deep tech investor investing in specifically Indian deep tech companies compared to in the valley. Maybe it's just my algorithm on X, probably, but I've heard like very recently a lot of teams kind of complaining that Indian VCs are waiting for Indian companies to be vetted by foreign investments before investing in them. And I was just curious to have your opinion on that.
I think it's historic, right? I mean, if you look at how the services world started, most of the IT services companies were catering to the West, you know. So that sort of became the gold benchmark, if you like, that, if you're building something of consequence, should have vested clients. I mean, maybe it was not said in as many words, but it was subconsciously,
the meaning.
passed on. As in when we started building stuff, a lot of the narrative was, hey, listen, it was built in the West first, then in India, be it classified platforms, be it e-commerce platforms, and so on and so forth, right? But that's because, essentially we're a developing nation, and we will go through that curve like any other country has gone, right? And we are going through that curve. It's just that the inflection points are faster and maybe easier to achieve in the software paradigm, right? So therefore, the lens was largely that, how do we interpret this technology? How do we interpret this founder or founding team? How do we interpret this company idea, possibilities, and so on and so forth? Is there anything happening in the West? Who is doing it in the West? What is the template? Is it replicable? Is there a playbook? And those are keywords that are used very, very often. So it is easier to interpret a team, a tech, a market. And second, of course, if you look at just e-commerce, credit card usage in India came after a long time. It's just the adoption curve for various reasons, socio-economic reasons, and so on and so forth. And just the way we are, so we will follow that arc. So therefore, it is interpretation, early validation, and the fact that, look, and we've seen that in the SaaS paradigm also, a lot of the Indian customers don't pay, a lot for the product in question. The Western customers do. Western counterparts in companies and products have raised a lot more funds, charge much more, and so on and so forth. We've had examples of companies who've sold to the West first and then come to India. Right? So there's a market question also. Is the market bigger if you go global? Right? So it's interpretation, validation, and scale. I think all three of them. And in deep tech specifically, I think the problem is that it's very hard to assess the science in tech.
Yes.
Right. And if there's some validation from the West, it just short circuits the whole process. So it's just that I just believe that there is no pattern recognition yet in deep tech, unlike SaaS, P2P, or D2C.
Absolutely.
And once that starts happening, I don't know if that'll happen in all or some areas where deep tech is solving problems. But the fundamental point is that deep tech is not SaaS in a lab coat. It is a completely different sort of, ball game altogether.
I think from my perspective, because obviously I'm born and brought up in France and I also studied in Denmark, we were discussing about design coming way earlier inside like tech and deep tech companies. I think this is also maybe something that the more this will happen in India, maybe the better customer will also understand the price point and everything, because in Europe it's just everywhere around you design. And I think that's why you don't really question in term as a team if you will bring designer early on or not. And so as a customer you also don't question that. So maybe I'm optimistic, possibly. But yeah, the more it will be coming early, the better it will get.
I think there's also, you mentioned, right, that one of the things that the Indian deep tech infrastructure is sort of growing in its own manner is also the economical discipline of the founders. And I see what you're saying with that, because it's true, because I've spoken to a lot of startups now, whether that's Series A stage, Series C stage. They've achieved far more scale, better results, more legible outcomes than their Western counterparts. However, the validation still is yet to be sought, despite having sort of like very legible, bigger numbers out there. So, do you reckon when you say economical discipline, there's also a certain negative connotation attached to that mindset? And that's kind of one of those things, like, you think it's something that we still need to work on in a way in terms of that mindset sort of point of view?
Maybe not, because frugal innovation is still innovation.
Yes.
Innovation under constraints is actually better,
Yeah.
right? And there's a age old adage which says necessity is the mother of invention, right? I mean, that's a function of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So constraints are good in my view. They're necessarily not they don't put Indian innovation in a bad light. It's just that there's not many precedents yet. It took us a while to sort of prove to the world that software we can do very well. I mean, we have to go through that cycle. And how we can short circuit that is a question, really. And therefore, again, infrastructure, patient capital, industry coming together, giving problem areas to solve, being the first customers, all of that, because we have abundance of use cases. You know, um, climate, energy, defense, sovereignty,
Yeah.
manufacturing capabilities, all of those are worthwhile use cases for the country to solve for. And therefore, I mean, there are enough people out there who can potentially look at these areas to solve for. Question is, who will be the first customer? The government, yes, but can it be the only first customer? Then there's a problem, because other people also have to come around and say, you know what, we'll buy from you also.
Yeah.
Otherwise, founders will have to look westward.
Outside.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting, because the more prominent our sort of communication strategy with the fact that we want to niche down into deep tech, we want to niche down into hardware. Um, it was received surprisingly positively by the ecosystem, because it's all not that big right now. And it was sought out as we're so happy in a way. Like it was kind of a retrospect of like, finally, like, okay, it's being acknowledged in a way, I feel. And I've heard more, and maybe it's my algorithm again, it's because we operate in this industry, but do you reckon India is taking deep tech more seriously than it did, let's say, 5 years ago? Because we've been operational for 2 years, but I've been working in this domain for now also 8 years, right?
Yeah.
I've seen that sort of steeper curve there. So do you think India is taking deep tech seriously more than it did, let's say, 5 years ago? Or
Yes, absolutely, and that's largely because of a bunch of reasons. If you look at geopolitics, I mean,
yeah,
the way it is changing things. I mean, the need for sovereign capabilities in defense, in energy, um, materials, manufacturing, all of that. We need to. I mean, what has happened in the last few years is everybody is relooking at their supply chains, recalibrating, questioning, you know, um, and trying to figure out, what is the best way to do this.
mhm,
And people are overstating that. Um, warfare is different now. I mean, what we're seeing with the whole oil situation,
yeah,
um, is completely making us question the way we, look at energy. So one is this whole geopolitics, which is making India think again, right? And of course, in general, I mean, warfare changing, right? For example, if you've heard about this phrase called mosaic warfare,
mhm,
I mean, and we've seen that in the Ukraine-Russia war and everything else that's happening around in the Middle East as well. But defense sovereignty is becoming a big deal. How do you look at defense? Strategies has changed completely, right? Sovereign capabilities on those,
Mm-hmm.
the whole stack, has to be relooked at, which again makes you look at supply chain, manufacturing, IP, so on and so forth.
Mm.
The third very interesting, and this is my view, very interesting thing that's happening is that the way AI has moved,
Oh yeah.
right? It has changed the way things are done. You can do with a handful of people what you had needed about 100 people for. Secondary research, while agreed it has to be done, cautiously using AI platforms, but still it can short circuit a lot of work. So that is compressing innovation cycles, or can potentially compress innovation cycles. So there are much more possibilities now.
Yeah.
I think all of these things are coming together,
Yeah.
and the push from the government again, the large corpus of funding announced.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely,
It will
there.
increase, I think, in the future.
Yeah. And like I said, most of the academia and the institutes were tuned for the way the software world operated.
Yeah.
Build, launch, take feedback,
Yeah.
repeat.
Yeah.
Short bursts of sprints, right? Deep tech has a different rhythm to it.
It does. It's much longer.
Much longer, much more complex. It's much layered, much nuanced, and so on and so forth. So I think academia, industry, buyers, investors, everybody has sort of woken up to that rhythm,
Yeah.
understanding that rhythm, and getting tuned to it.
Yeah. It's very interesting how you mentioned that the way technology, generally speaking, with AI and stuff is evolving, and it's shortening the sort of span that it takes for secondary research, generally speaking. And I feel like the approachability to deep tech as an industry is getting, in a way, like the gap is getting shorter now, because I feel like you can be well read on things. You can be, I just feel like a more unapproachability of the technical viability and the technical jargons attached to, let's say, deep tech, for the lack of a better word. Um, do you think the investment industry, generally speaking, is evolving to how they see deep tech? And if so, how? Like, because at least from our experience, from the little we've experienced, and we've spoken to you on this at length, of course, but what do you think? How is the ecosystem responding to this change, and how they see deep tech?
It will be hard for me to say for the entire ecosystem, but but like I said, I like to read a lot on the science, on the tech,
Yeah.
and ask deeper questions. What is also happening is that I'm speaking to a lot of people. What they're saying is that, hey, listen, they're getting together a bunch of experts as advisors, whom can help them evaluate the science and tech, right? Because it's not possible to build all the capabilities in house, because deep tech is anything that can come from the left field, which has not existed.
Yeah.
So one is evaluation, which I think is solvable if you have a lot of experts working with you closely. That's one lens, but that's not the only lens, because what is important is, how does this science or tech come out of the lab and becomes usable, becomes a product, becomes a company which is commercially viable, economically scalable to give venture capital the kind of returns it has been used to in the software world, right? So I think a different understanding of risk, a different understanding of the timelines and the gestation, a different understanding of the founder archetypes,
Yeah.
a different understanding of how go to market will evolve, will need to work, etc., is evolving. And it will go through its own cycle. But I think it's happening. I mean, the ball's rolling on that. Having said that, the companies need to evolve faster than the industry.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, like I said, for investors, deep tech is not SaaS, but deep tech is also not science,
Yes.
right?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So both the investors and the founders have to, you know, walk a bit of a mile uh, to understand, explain, intersect for a company to become what it wants to,
Yeah.
for a company to return what it should
Yeah.
or ought to,
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
I was about to what you're explaining, like both needs to in a way come together and make an effort. We recently had a very interesting conversation that's coming more often now, because this deep tech term is getting used a lot from many different people. We're talking with this deep tech company that was telling us that we need to fix all their assets right now, because they received capital, but they received capital from a partner that did not understand deep tech. And so it created this whole narrative around the wrong customer. And that is like a recurring problem that's happening more and more and with many different companies. So I feel like the conversation, at least from our point of view, is becoming more not how do I raise, but how do I raise with the right people also to get the right partnership in and to be able to evolve the company in the right direction also.
Do you inherently encourage your portfolio companies to seek narrative fixes? Is that something that you encourage, for example, companies? Is that an active conversation that you have
Yes,
more often?
yes, absolutely. And it's not narrative. It's like I said, what are you designing this company to be? Are you designing for just being another company, or are you designing for being a category leader? Because
Yeah.
essentially, if you have IP that nobody else has built thus far, if you have a splendid, unfair technological or scientific advantage, then you should either be creating a category or leading one.
Yeah.
So how do you get to do that?
Yeah.
So you have to start thinking from the early days as opposed to it being a fix.
Yeah.
At some point in time. Yeah.
What
Nature.
if you were to redesign a company's, because I think it's one of those things, right? So when we encourage our founders and teams to let's streamline your communication, let's create some sort of funnel to this, let's evaluate your sales call. Same applies to us, don't we? So sometimes when we have to answer those questions from our lens, it's much harder to answer those questions if you're sort of internally also. Let's say I flip because I just you do encourage your companies, portfolio companies, to do that narrative fix. If you were in a similar position when it comes to narrative, not fixing, but let's say redesign a company narrative, what would be your first sort of point of contact when it comes to that change slash yeah.
I think the biggest deficit in any story of a deep tech company is center of gravity. What is that one thing that the company stands for?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And simplest example I can give is from the age old comic book character. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Superman.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the company simply?
Yeah.
Not to scientists, not to engineers,
Right.
to everybody.
Yeah. A simple sentence.
Simple sentence, simple explanation.
Yeah.
I'm talking it very, simply, but I think, it has to unpack, like we said, for every intended audience. For the regulator, what does this mean?
Yeah.
What are the precedents? What are challenges? What are the risks? What will it solve? Is it diagnostic? Is it not? Is it companion? Whatever you have me. Who are your first users? What should they test for a pilot / POC? What should they expect as outcome? What does that mean? How will it convert to a revenue thing?
Yeah.
How will you scale? Why will you scale?
Yeah.
All of that is part of that
Center of
narrative.
gravity. Yeah.
And that center of gravity lends to all of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I think the company starts with that, and then the technology is built around it, and not the opposite way around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to have a discipline about the clarity of purpose
Yeah.
that people can see.
Yeah. And I think when you have like a 10-year cycle of like research and development, it's even
needs to
harder
Yeah.
to like remember this center of gravity. I've noticed compared to like companies that get their product out there a bit faster, you forget it like a bit less. But for deep tech companies, it's risky. Yeah.
But it'll change in my view, right? Because see, I mean, to me, a 10-year R&D cycle is a cop out. Is an escape, saying that look, we're scientists, we're engineers. The point is, you're not pure researchers. You're not academia.
Yeah.
You're building a company. You're building a product that people will buy.
Yeah.
So if you don't want the next parallel / inferior existing company to win because they have a better narrative and story and whatnot, or because their tech is more understandable, usable, etc., then you have to do this properly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, technology readiness level has, as defined by NASA, 0 to 9, right? By the time you're at 6, 7, 8, you're moving towards commercialization, in some time, you have to be ready for people to understand what you're building, for you to be able to make that sale, for you to be able to convince someone to do a pilot, without a lot of friction.
Yeah.
So it has to start.
Yeah, so I think like we've been talking at length around translation, the technical viability that's lost in translation, the usability, adoptability, all those things. But up until this point, because this conversation was simply to allow for a free flowing conversations around design from a lens that is not designer, we haven't spoken about the assets that contain that sort of translation or narrative thing, which is the most common carrier of which being a pitch deck, or a data room set of presentations, let's say, whatnot. um so I guess like and this is a very seriously typical question. I guess this is something that maybe some of the founders that are right now making some of their pitch decks, maybe in house or themselves or with a design team. What are some of the, I would say, like common mistakes in a way that you've seen, that you, in your personal, of course, opinion and experience, think of it as a, yeah, what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen when it comes to specifically pitch decks, not
Yeah,
websites and stuff?
it'll be vain of me to say there are mistakes. I'll just say what I would like to see in your pitch deck, right? Although I'm the wrong person, because I do early stage investments, and I don't look at a lot of pitch decks as they come. I go through them, but I look beyond them. I look at the science first and the tech first, and so on and so forth. But I've seen a lot of pitch decks. Having said that, so I think one would like to see is, and I mentioned this earlier, that the talk about technology is inundating, right? There's a lot of emphasis on tech, rightly so, but it has to be simplified for the audience. I mean, you don't expect the reader, and obviously, first goes to analysts and the whole chain which looks at the decks. You don't want to get rejected because somebody was not able to understand what your story is, what you want to say. Or is it very complex tech, and you don't have the expertise to evaluate, and so on and so forth. So one thing is, a story about the tech and how it can be evaluated. I think that's nobody does that, but I think if people started doing that, how is it possible to evaluate and verify this tech? That's the biggest question people have. Look, how can I judge this? I don't know how to do that. So maybe it's better to stay away.
Yeah.
Um, and second thing is, there is no, and a lot of times I've seen this, there's no coherence in the decks, right? The founder's saying something, the deck is talking about a large market, the technology points somewhere else. I mean, they're all vector quantities in different directions. So it has to all come together. So that cohesion in the story is a mess. It all boils down to that center of gravity. Is the pitch deck pointing to that, right? And essentially, when you go to investors, right, the idea is, this is an idea slash concept slash science slash tech, which is going to become a product, or prototype product, and then commercialize, right? That's the sequence of events. How can you lend more believability in that sequence? Like, how do I know this prototype? Because essentially what I believe is, and which is true also, is for the longest time, deep tech ideas are binary until they are not, right?
Yeah.
Because they fall away on one side. And therefore, at what stage does the binary nature go away? Is there a way for you to,
Figure that out.
put that down, or call out the risks? Look, I don't know, but we will try to sort of, look at these 4 or 5 areas to see if this risk goes away, but it will remain. So call out that risk. Who is going to be the first user? Where will the POC be at first? What will be the success parameters of the POCs? I mean, I don't know if it's the pitch deck or not, but if you write that, it'll be awesome, because it just explains to me everything. That, okay, this is a science becoming a technology slash engineering sort of, paradigm into a prototype. Somebody's going to do a POC, and this is how it can be. It judged successful or not, and this is why people will adopt it, and so on and so forth. So the whole story has to come together.
Yeah.
I feel.
It's just making me think also, we had like conversation in length also about that, of the format of a pitch deck, and we are the people that help building those pitch deck, and more often now we are wondering if this format should also completely change. You were saying that this is not necessarily what you're looking at when you're looking at early stage company also. So because you're the one receiving those assets, do you think it should also evolve the formats from
It should evolve. Like, for example, I mean, if you have a data room, which are the papers which tell you, right? Can you distill those papers for me?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Because I feel like
authentically.
pitch tech as an asset is like so far for me feels very disconnected from the entire work the teams are doing.
Pitch deck is not the story.
It feels like completely unusable for anything else than this specific purpose. And the more we are working with also investors in that space, the more it feels like nobody's actually happy with this specific asset. So I'm wondering if there's
The format, I feel like it's very interesting because we are also in a constant, like, at the end of the day, we are also in the business of evolution. Both of us, when we design, this is in the business of evolution, generally speaking, and we are always constantly on a hunt of what's the next thing, even from our lens, right? So there's certain media that have been sort of like labeled as a certain set of media for a certain set of communication. When you look at a website or a web experience, it used to be a block of text explaining to you what, the first website, it was a page that was telling you how to use a website in the first place, right? So it was a block of text, and we at length have these internal philosophical conversation around. We've just been scrolling, I feel like, for a decade now, and it doesn't change. It hasn't changed, and the media constantly gets evolved, and we're always on a lookout for that. And I feel like more and more we're seeing more with, because I feel like the last year, 2 years or 4 years have kind of compressed a certain evolution in technology that has sort of enabled people like us to use mediums that we hadn't used before. Like,
Absolutely.
it's and like, I recently saw this article, or this, I don't know, maybe it was Twitter, not the most verifiable source of my information, but it was Interface X. Interface sounds like, it sounds like I'm on like a wrong website. Interface AI. And these guys are like, hey, you don't come to a website to like talk about everything that the company is doing, because some parts of the website are meant for buyers, some parts of the website are meant
Absolutely.
for investors, so what they do is they're like, hey, just ask our app, like our website person, what you want to know, and they'll just distill that information for you, and that's already there. Like, we can buy it for our own website, we can implement it. And I think that says a lot for the psychology of how that's evolving, that's changing, that you need distillation, you need personalization, you need hyper targeted information that you want. Because even within, and I'm sure you've experienced it for yourself, within a pool of investment funds, investors, they're not all seeking same questions. It's different.
No, absolutely. And we've talked about this, right? For example, I look at early stage, very early stage, right?
Exactly.
Right. And somebody looks at, Series A and around about that. And there are people looking at Series B, C, and beyond. They're looking at very different parameters.
Yeah.
They're looking at a very different skeleton of the company to be, right? At an early stage, for example, sometimes some founders are very early, and I say, hey, do you have a white paper? Can I start with that? As opposed to a pitch deck,
Yeah.
because pitch deck is a sales pitch.
Yeah.
It is not about what the company is. It is talking about just about everything under the sun, right?
Yeah.
So just like you said, for example, can there be a dossier,
Yeah.
which
Yes.
is a function of where the company is,
Yes.
which talks about the narrative,
Yeah.
the company, and so on and so forth. And a lot of these companies are in physical products, physical capabilities also.
Yeah.
It's very hard to experience them.
Yeah.
So, is there a way for us to say, what, hey, listen, how can I experience the product?
So this is the
How
main
can the
conversation.
customers experience the product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like those. I think all of this has to change down the line. Demos have to begin. And I'm not talking about Tony Stark coming on stage and showing the Iron Man suit, which could be a way too.
I mean,
Yeah, but the proof is in the pudding. The best ways to test out a voice AI platform is to use
So,
the
use it. Yeah.
voice AI platform, for example.
Exactly.
So all of this will have to transcend those boundaries of what is a pitch, what is a deck,
Yeah.
what convinces whom. All this has to be, recalibrated thoughtfully.
Yeah.
I reckon we can all three of us can have a full brainstorming session about
I'd love that. Yeah.
what
We
would
should maybe. Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
do that, because I feel like with the media evolving, information, narrative, all of that can translate in so many different ways. Like there's folks out there that are, literally physically with obsidian, and so we can make your own mind map, right, of your own mind. So why can't you do that for your company? Of course you can do that. You can live track things. I'm seeing more and more like Seed Health. I think it's a brilliant example of that. Seed's like a prebiotic probiotic company. They're very science forward.
Yeah.
They're obviously a consumer facing company, but they have this other form of a website called seedhealth.com or something like that. And it's kind of like not a live dossier that you can interact with, but it is a dossier of where
But the
the
research.
product is, the research pieces, stuff like that. And I think the thoughtfulness that it takes for that company to put up a separate website that answers only and only to other stakeholders that are not their direct customers is a testament to how streams of media are changing. It's not a document, it's not a deck, it's not an ugly presentation. It's a well crafted, hey, this is our level of development, each of these segments of products, and
Absolutely.
that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And I believe all this should be a set of living artifacts,
Absolutely.
Yes.
evolving. Because the problem is, for example, I met a company a couple of years back. I want to go back and look at what's happening there. The only way I can look at it, the website.
Yeah.
And
there's not a
don't
lot.
have to reach the founders and then make a call. The founders are not raising.
Yes.
I can't tell what the progress is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some founders send a newsletter, but again, it's a marketing pitch.
Yeah,
It's not capturing the journey.
No.
Yeah.
So if the dossier was a set of living artifacts which trace the journey of the company in time, I think that would be fabulous, not just for someone who wants to understand the company, but for the founders who want to explain the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The closest that exists today is just founders posting on their like socials about updates from the company.
That's just part of the story.
That's
Very
part of
small
the story, but that's the closest you have today from understanding day to day what's going on for them. Yeah.
Because see, a lot of it is about how you interpret the content.
Yeah.
And if there's not enough content, you interpret less, incorrectly, inaccurately,
Yeah.
inaptly,
Yeah.
all of that.
We've had many a coffee sessions around these conversations. We've been, of course, like seeking your mentorship around certain conversations, stuff like that. It's very good to have you now finally out and about in public talking about these things, because we haven't really seen you as much in the domain of like talking about. Of course, your Substack is incredible. Of course, people know about that. But how did it feel like today to interact? Because usually I'm sure you're called on panel stuff to talk about your expertise from your domain, but today we spoke largely about design and deep tech. So how has that conversation? I know you're pretty introverted in that aspect. So how was that conversation?
That was brilliant. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it, and this is something that's very close to my heart, and I believe it's something worth pursuing for the industry. Absolutely enjoyed it. So thank you for having me here.
We were glad to have you.
I love how we always overlap. He said
It's a problem in the editing.
But
No,
I guess that's enough for now. This is it for now. That's our closing statement. We can turn on the AC now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.